Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly Livestock Market Update. I'm Brownfield Anchor reporter Meghan Grebner with us as always to talk all things markets. University of Missouri, Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Meghan.
Happy Friday to you. And this, are we in the fake spring portion of spring, the spring weather cycle right now with the temperatures that have been going on this week?
Let's hope we haven't gone to summer straight up here and we have a little bit more spring, but it's a beautiful day out there.
It is definitely that. And while I am always happy to see you, I am definitely sad to not be outside working in the yard today.
Some of us might be getting ready to take in another baseball game yet today. So we've been taking advantage of the good weather.
There's always that baseball thing too. All right. We're going to talk supply and demand numbers. We're going to talk retail meat prices. And also consumer sentiment, which I think is really interesting as we take a look at those April numbers. But let's recap what I would like to call a very wild week in the markets, especially if you're looking at some cash cattle business.
That's right. We'll take the positives on the cattle side as our start here today. Live fed cattle 725 higher this week, Megan. You know, that puts some almost $40 above where we were a year ago. So really good news there. Those feeder cattle markets were also strong this week, up $4 to $8. The June live cattle futures contract was up about 40 cents this week, and the May feeders was up 265 when even May corn was up 21 3/4 this week. On the beef side, the choice box beef price gained very nicely this week, up $9.30. That puts it at 25 and some change above where it was a year ago on strength across all of those components. On the hog side, a little different story here. Cash barrels and gilts were down about 85 cents this week. The June lean hog futures contract was down $1.30 this week. Pork cutout value was basically unchanged. We really lost on bellies this week and offset some of the positives in the other components.
I think the interesting thing on the cash side of things, while we did end up at least slightly higher in some areas in cattle futures, that hasn't been the case the last couple of days. We've really kind of seen some a little bit of slide, and I would assume some profit taking happening at the end of the week.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, golly, I think we're far from at the top of cash cattle, fed cattle as we look ahead. And I don't know where the top is. I wish I could call it. I was talking to some colleagues this week, asking them when they thought we would put our high in, and most of them would respond late 2024 or early 2025. And we're several months away from that, Megan.
There is there's obviously a lot of risk on both sides of this, and part of that conversation that we continue to have, but there sure is a lot of upside potential looking in the cattle business right now.
Yeah, and you raise a really good point. I want everyone to remember that now's the time to be, I shouldn't say now's the time. Protecting the downside is always an option in these up markets. Don't get yourself in the mode that they can never go down. There is downside risk here. These opportunities that you can take advantage of are sure nice today.
All right, let's take a look at slaughter numbers as we look back at the week. How are we running for both cattle and hogs?
Yeah, so USDA tells us for the week ending April 15th, a run of 613,000 head of cattle. That is up 10,000 head from last week, but down 25,000 head relative to where we were a year ago. And on the hog side, a run of 2.438 million head for the week. That's 68,000 more than where we were a week ago and 92,000 more than where we were a year ago.
And I would say, too, we had a pretty slow Monday, at least on the hog side of things. I'm assuming a little bit of an extension of that holiday weekend. There's been a lot of hogs being slaughtered lately.
Yeah. So when you look at the year-to-date numbers here, you know, so part of the reason why I think we see the differences in the price moves we're getting, cattle slaughter year-to-date down 2.9 and hog slaughter up 1.6, just keeps reminding me that we've kind of switched positions between cattle and hogs when you look at those slaughter numbers year-to-date.
supply and demand numbers out this week, Scott. That's probably the big one. So we're going to start off there. Walk me through the biggest takeaways you have from that USDA report.
Yeah, so I think two things here on the S&U side of the equation. So USDA raised meat production, red meat and poultry, a little more than 200 million pounds this month relative to where they were in March. That was an increase in beef production and an increase in chicken production. They actually lowered pork production 50 million pounds, but more meat supplies. They also increased exports this week of those meats, up 120 million pounds relative to what they were projecting in March. So that added 120 million pounds. All three meats gained from that. When you look at the prices, unfortunately, USDA's lowered hog prices this month for 2023 by $5, raised fed cattle prices by $2.50, and the one that sticks out, turkey prices, now they've raised $9.50 relative to where they were back in March.
And I would have to assume that also will depend on what happens with avian influenza, and we could see those prices go even higher if we see another outbreak and another string of outbreaks like we did in 2022.
Absolutely, Megan. I think you hit the nail on the head. And yes, supplies have been coming back, but still not adequate relative to what's been pulling on the demand side. So we're getting this push higher yet again in turkey prices. And what we do between now and the end of the year will matter a lot in terms of where those prices go for the remainder of this year.
And I know we're going to talk retail meat prices, but I did see a story this week about egg prices and their decline. That has to be a little bit of good news on the retail side of things for consumers because it's such a staple protein for households.
Yeah, that's right. We're finally seeing what goes up can come down in terms of those egg prices. So they were retail egg prices according to according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, $3.45 a dozen in March, down 18% from February. However, that was still 68% above where they were a year ago. So coming down, I think they'll continue to work their way down. And now that we're getting beyond Easter, perhaps that demand will slow just a little bit. I'm curious whether beef becomes the next egg story in terms of higher beef prices, but that's certainly not what we're seeing out of the data from BLS this month. So the choice retail beef price at $7.64 is actually down 0.6% from where it was a year ago. On the pork side of the equation, pork retail price $4.76 per pound. That's down 1.6% relative to where it was a year ago. Just basically unchanged relative to last month. So a big difference, I think, when we look at the little more aggregate here. So the CPI for meat and poultry products for March was 4.3% above year ago levels. That's almost half the growth we would have seen versus where we were back in January. So we're slowing that CPI for meat and poultry products. My expectation is that as we get further into this year, beef prices will likely start to go back up, and maybe that will start to drive us with some higher CPI for meat in front of us.
How much is that balance between what's going on with retail beef prices? And let's just talk beef because the potential is so much higher for it to move higher.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of opportunity for higher prices now. If you look at what's been happening, all right. So number one, I want to stop for a minute and say BLS always gives us shelf price here, right? So if there are specials going on, sometimes that will tend to mask the true underlying net price being paid. So as everyone looks at that BLS data going forward, make sure you remind yourselves that, again, that is the shelf price, not any specials. Boneless sirloin steak prices, Meghan, are still down 3.5% March of this year relative to the previous year, yet ground beef up 1.2%. So this idea that we've been buying down seems to still be happening through the March data. However, I think when you look at the general economy, maybe we've gotten a little more optimistic about where we're headed in front of us. So, we might flip that and start to see steak prices go higher. But those are the opportunities in front of us.
And we haven't gotten to the point yet, it doesn't seem like, in terms of demand, that consumers are starting to back off those higher end or those beef purchases due to price yet.
Correct. And I'll say, I think we're going to test what kind of substitutability there is between beef and pork and chicken when beef prices are substantially higher than pork and chicken. They're already much higher than pork and chicken prices today, but I think the spread only widens as we likely talk about at least pork prices that might continue to move down here through the year, yet beef prices moving much higher. I keep saying I don't think there's as much substitutability as there used to be, but if the spread gets wide enough, that might make restaurants change their focus in terms of what meat's on center of plate.
Is that also a little bit of a testament to what the beef industry has done to scale up quality and to make it that desirable purchase and the thing that you're going for in the grocery store or at the meat counter?
Amen, Megan. I say all the time, I ask audiences, when you want to go out and have a really good meal, what do you eat? And I've yet to get one that says chicken. That they all say, I want a good steak. And frankly, that's very price insensitive. If I want to go out and have a really good meal and I'm going to have a steak, I'm less concerned about what I'm paying for that. I'm not saying I'm not concerned, but just less concerned. I think the beef industry has done a wonderful job of putting in front of consumers what they want. Now, just consumers change what they want in front of us. Maybe that's not so going to be so helpful for us, but boy, the beef industry has just done a wonderful job in placing that product.
All right. Consumer sentiment is how we're going to round out today. And actually, I would say we're ending on a positive note, but it's kind of like a wash.
Yeah, so we'll take it, right? Especially the way we started this year. So the index of consumer sentiment was actually 2.4% higher in April than it was relative to March of this year. Yet it is down 2.6% relative to April of a year ago. So a little bit of a mixed bag. I like the current situation index that's up 3.5% for April relative to where it was in March, down 1.2. The index of expectations helped drag the overall index relative to its year ago levels down a little harder. We'll wait and see as we see what kind of economic growth and effective higher interest rates has on the general economy as we roll into May. Interestingly, out of that report this week, sentiment among lower income consumers was rising, and that really offset what was declines among those with higher income levels. To me, that's some positive news for some of maybe what we might think of as lower value meat products, but maybe better demand in front of us for some of the more, again, cheaper products when you think about beef and pork in particular.
Scott, that'll do it for us this week. As we look ahead to next week, livestock slaughter, cattle on feed also come out. What are you watching for in that cattle on feed report this month?
I think we're going to continue to see contraction happening on cattle on feed as we look ahead. I expect on feed numbers continue to be at best flat as we've kind of looked at the first few months of this year. We've kind of been flat at the same level of cattle on feed. That'll be below year ago levels. I think we continue to talk about contraction, and that will continue to again expand as we go forward. I am looking at what livestock slaughter looks like in terms of beef cow slaughter. Are we seeing? We're seeing some signs of slowing down. Are we going to try to build a herd this year? I think the answer is probably not, but we're going to keep watching that slaughter data as well.
We won't get heifer numbers on feed for June, right?
That's correct.
It's definitely, I think this spring, depending on the weather, especially like thinking from cow producers I've talked to in the Dakota regions, things are a little bit more optimistic than they were in the last couple of years. And I'm curious to see how that impacts what we do with heifers.
Yeah, so we certainly are starting with better rainfall, but we got a lot of lack of subsoil moisture in those. And I keep saying Texas to Dakotas. So we're going to need timely rainfall. If that happens, I think we get more retention than I otherwise would have thought to be the case. But if it turns dry, we could be right back in some pretty tough situation by summer in some of those states if they don't get timely rains.
Scott, always great to see you. Looking forward to our conversation next Friday.
Sounds great, Megan.
I'm glad you and Brent didn't burn the house down last week while I was gone.
We did our best, and I don't think we embarrassed you too much when the two of us did it together.
Well, I appreciate you both. We will talk to you next Friday. All right. It's our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday morning. Go to brownfieldagnews.com. You can also submit questions and comments there. And for the rundown and what's happening in the markets every day, make sure to check out John Perkins' Market Minute. Have a great weekend. I'm Meghan Grebner for Brownfield.